Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Robust Ramblings podcast. Today I'm sharing a conversation I had with Hannah Le Roux, an attorney and soon to be advocate. She's got great input and great knowledge in law and in business, and this conversation was absolutely awesome to have. I'm excited to share it with you guys. Grab your notebooks out. If you guys got questions, leave it in the comments. And yeah, let's have a listen. And welcome back to the Robust Ramblings podcast. And today I've got a good friend joining me, a highly qualified individual, if I may say myself. Her name is attorney, soon to be advocate, Hannah Le Roux. Hi, Hannah. How are you?
Fine, and you, Sergio?
Very good, thank you. So, just to give like a little bit of a background on Hannah here, she is a fully admitted attorney. She's done her years in the workforce to get her admission, and she obtained a LLB degree cum laude from the University of Pretoria. And she's very passionate about business. She's passionate about law. And yeah, Hannah, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and just give us a little bit of a rundown just to get some feel.
Sure. So, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time. In terms of the journey to get here, obviously, I've completed my LLB and I chose the path amongst many that LLB graduates have, and that is to do my articles of clerkship so that I can write my board exams and get admitted as an attorney. It was a really enjoyable experience, and I think the best thing that I could have done, not because of the fact that it ended in admission as an attorney, but because I really got to grasp the soft skills that are important for business and for working with people in general, which I think is the best skill that graduates can learn straight out of varsity. Obviously completed that process, and throughout my journey as a candidate attorney, I really was interested in courtcraft in particular and the business model setup that advocates have, because I think people always want to know what is the major difference between attorney and advocate. And I would argue that it's the business model, it's how you derive your income, where advocates are a lot more independent and they work in groups, but they mostly run their own practice. And so that was really appealing to me. I'd finished my articles and then applied to the Joburg Bar and was luckily accepted. And so that's where I find myself today.
Amazing. So, are you telling us that you are a soon to be advocate?
Yeah, so if and when the exams are written and passed, then I will be
Yeah,
admitted as an advocate, which I hope will be sometime in September when I've passed my mock exams and
that's
when I can do my
amazing.
conversion.
That's
Because
amazing.
as an attorney, yeah, so in terms of the new Legal Practice Act, if you've been admitted, you can convert as opposed to do a
Sure.
formal application to the court once
Oh
again.
wow.
So yeah,
And Hannah, not to call you out on your age, but how old are you right now?
I just turned 25.
Whoop whoop.
Whoop
So
whoop.
this is absolutely amazing. Graduating from the University of Pretoria, cum laude, and being admitted, doing all these amazing things, and soon to be an advocate. We're all holding thumbs, but we're quite sure that you're going to become an advocate. Um, so Hannah, tell us where did your passion for business actually start? I know we've had some chats in the past regarding business, and I know you've got this unique passion for business. Where did it start? Did it start at home, or did it start literally at varsity or something?
So in my family, I wouldn't say that my immediate family is entrepreneurial, and I really was always interested in entrepreneurship, but there are risks involved with it. And the household that I grew up in, I watched us get by and, support a family with a run-of-the-mill 9 to 5 job. And so for me, for a long time, a 9 to 5 job was the way that you provide for your family, you ensure stability in the home. And entrepreneurship and business in that sense was always something that intrigued me, but I felt was never within my grasp, or at least something that I was comfortable navigating with all of the risks. And I think the older you get and the more open you become to the world, the more you realize that it's important to have multiple streams of income if you actually want to live in a way that isn't inherently risky to the point where, every single expense that you have in your life is reliant on your single salary. And I think it's very easy to watch American movies, for example, where people are working 4 or 5 jobs. But in South Africa, the economy and the structure of business doesn't really allow for that. There's a lot of full-time employment because part-time employment doesn't pay the bills. And so I was interested in business because it always seemed like if you can get a crack at this, imagine having multiple streams of income and a little bit of leeway to do what you need to do. So that's kind of where I became quite intrigued with business and what it can do. But mostly, I think when people study an LLB degree, they learn a lot of transferable skills. And one of them, I think, is the ability to manage risk, but also see into the future. And I think that's a skill that any business owner should have. And if you transfer it into your qualification, it puts you in good stead to explore the world in a business setting while still managing risk.
Yeah. So you're not, obviously you're not saying this, and you need to be a lawyer, obviously to be a business owner. You're not saying that, but you're saying it's always beneficial to have these soft skills leading up to whatever you want to do one day.
Yes, and a lot of people give lawyers a hard time and they say, you go into law because you can't do the numbers, but you have to have some sort of a grasp on the numbers and on the maths of a business to be able to be successful in it. I mean, you work with money, and I would say that calculating risk is inherently numerical in some way or another. So you definitely don't have to be a lawyer, but I would argue that if you have some sort of legal transferable soft skills, you would probably be 9 out of 10 times successful in a business setting if you even used a quarter of your skills that you learn while studying.
So how would you say that the background in business or even commerce would benefit those entering the legal profession?
Well, the first thing I would say is probably the relationship with people. In business, we obviously have to make sure that we get on with our peers. And if we don't get on with them, how do we manage that so that we can still do business? But business also gives us a good understanding of what's happening in the world. Uh, Contracts, tax, all of these things that businesses deal with on a day-to-day basis, things that are very difficult to actually get your hands on and understand if you don't have practical knowledge of it, because you can read the legislation, you can know the law, but if you've never filed a tax return and you've never negotiated a contract with a business partner or even a friend, I do think those are skills that you would be missing if you didn't have a business background.
Yeah. So with that being said, you obviously went to law school. You did your 4 years at Pretoria, and then you started working and all that, in order to be admitted. So, what perspective for law students interested in business law or a focus in that, would you say there is during the law school experience?
Mm. So I think what law school is, or at least studying, because colloquially, law students or those who have graduated with their LLB will call law school the practical school that they do above their degree so that they can gain entry into the exam. So you obviously study at varsity, and if you do a straight LLB, you do 4 years. But then if you go into doing your articles, you have to do law school, which is a set amount of hours so that you can get that accredit, you can get those credits to write the exam. But what I would say is, if you're studying your LLB, there are lots of modules that introduce you into the real world. And one of those is any type of module that speaks about insolvency. So things that influence the liquidity of a business, things that influence the liquidity of people. And That can be anything from, a person being unable to satisfy their debts and being sequestrated, or businesses being unable to satisfy their debts and being sequestrated, and the process that they would have to follow in order to one day regain their full status to operate. So that's one. I think another one would be company law or some sort of commercial law where you deal with memorandums of incorporation of businesses. You kind of you tip your toe, you dip your toe into the world of shareholders agreements and types of meetings that need to be held and the quorum that they need to be held in order to pass certain decisions in businesses. So I think what it gives you in university is just a really broad spectrum introduction into the world of business through those types of models.
Sure. And would you say that more opportunities popped up in your sphere? Obviously, you've been around a lot of people, probably with students as well that completed their BCom law degree, then entered into the LLB program. Would you say that it is essential to pass the bar exam for more opportunities to pop up in the world for a legal professional, or not really?
So I think that question is probably phrased in the way of, do you think that you would have more opportunity with your LLB if you were an admitted attorney? And yeah, and just so that I can kind of narrow down how I would answer that. And it's really, really difficult, and it saddens me because an LLB graduate is a graduate who has applied their mind and has worked hard and has done the necessary to gain a qualification. And LLB graduates are really struggling to find articles of clerkship for staff because we have 10 graduates coming out of university and 4 spots available to do your articles. So just by that very nature, I think it puts a lot of competition in the market, and it forces LLB graduates' hands. And I say force because when you're in varsity, if you aren't given a really broad spectrum of what you can do with your LLB degree, you really do become confined with what your options are. And I think the run-of-the-mill option that a lot of graduates think they have is they need to become an attorney and they need to find articles. But there really are so many opportunities out there. And I really don't think that if you take something other than articles and gain some exposure to the workplace, you'll be worse off by doing your articles at a later stage. And the rate at which candidate attorneys are leaving the workforce because of the issues that they experience in their articles is so high, that I honestly think everybody thinks the best thing to do is go straight into your articles, but there are opportunities, especially in graduate programs, for LLB graduates to do things in compliance and risk. There are opportunities in businesses that might not be inherently legal, but they require the soft skills of somebody with an LLB degree. So, ability to read and interpret certain documents, the ability to do research. So there really is a lot out there. It honestly just depends on what path you want your career to take and the time that it's going to take you to get there.
Yeah. So I've got a question on the back of my mind, right? So if you had to look at life in general right now, right, Hannah, and you take your LLB degree, being an admitted attorney, and a normal BCom law degree, okay? And I don't want you to take my side now because I've got a BCom law degree, but um, for business practicality, because there could be people listening to this with a LLB degree that's not admitted yet, or is being on a verge, or something like that, and a BCom law degree. In a business sense, what would you say is actually beneficial? Both, only LLB, only BCom? How would you see it?
So, first of all, if you ask me any question when it comes to getting more qualified or learning more, I would always say you will never be amiss if you have an additional qualification. And so the BCom law degree, if the University of Pretoria is anything to go by, falls in the commerce faculty, where the LLB falls in the legal faculty. So they are administered in very different ways. The BCom law degree is, and the way that it was when I was a student was they would allow you introductory modules into an LLB course, but you still had mostly commerce subjects. So you guys were still doing stats. You guys were doing company law, but it was geared more towards what you would experience in business as opposed to in practice. And I know that you guys were doing introductory modules to accounting. And when I say introductory, I mean it was introductory in the beginning, but after 3 years, you guys are doing quite advanced accounting. And so I think that by virtue of the BCom law degree falling in the commerce faculty, it was mostly geared towards commerce. And a lot of people, I think, have this idea that if you go into business law, you must have a BCom law degree. And the reason I say that in my opinion, that is not necessary is because your LLB degree teaches you the skills about how to read, apply, and interpret legislation. And as much as a BCom law degree assists you in the finances, it assists you in being able to quickly spot liquidity in an accounting statement where LLB candidates aren't using that side of their qualification, you will still, I believe, need an LLB degree to adequately advise legally in a business setting, because the LLB degree adds a specialized type of ability to take the commerce and apply it to a legal setting. So where LLB full candidates, or at least just the LLB degree, aren't necessarily reviewing financial documents and things like that, that is a skill that they would have to probably outsource as pure legal practitioners. So in a business model, you would have somebody working in a finance department or somebody doing the accounting of a business, your accountant, an attorney, or somebody with LLB, and who will give them the numbers, interpret their meanings from a numerical standpoint. But then the LLB graduate is still going to have to find the law that applies to that set of facts of numbers, be able to interpret it, and to be able to kind of find a legal conclusion or at least a legal solution.
Yeah.
So where I think you would be best fit in having both, I do believe in order to advise legally, an LLB degree is probably the thing that's going to really seal the deal for you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not against that at all. I think a lot of people just lose motivation to go study after the first
Mm.
degree, and they're like, no, man, I need to go work. That was my case because I
Yeah.
wanted to do the LLB right after and hit two birds with one stone, but I'm just like, I just
Mm.
want to start working.
And that's why I think looking at the options available, you would really be naive to not consider the additional length that an LLB or BCom LLB would take. So it's an additional 2 years on a qualification you already have that entitles you to enter the job market and to enter it as a qualified person. And that's why with all the hurdles that are put in place in order to just get admitted as an attorney, I can understand why there's a need for so many other options for that LLB degree, and those options to be legitimized to students as being just as good as some other path that they might have thought was the only thing that they can do with this degree that they have.
So Hannah, you are currently employed by a law firm, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No. So when I did my articles and when I was admitted, I was employed, and I was employed by a business, but there was also another contract that governed my employment. And that was registered with the LPC, the Legal Practice Council, because in those 2 years of my articles, I was doing what is called practical vocational training. So they pay you, but they are actually paying you to provide you with training. Now, I am already an admitted attorney, so I don't need to complete another practical vocational training contract, but I'm also somewhat of a member of the Joburg Bar, but not employed by the bar at all. So during this period, I get no pay whatsoever. This 1 year is 1 year, no pay. You aren't supposed to have any interests in any other businesses. You have to declare any directorship you've had. You have to state on affidavit that you've resigned from that business. And every hour that you have is dedicated to your pupil,
Sure. So this is
which is
actually,
what a lot of people don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is actually a tough one. So if you obviously wanted to start a business, and let's say you had an up and running business, or you inherited a business and you decided to go study, you need to literally resign from everywhere and revoke an income. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you aren't supposed to have a pecuniary interest in any type of business. And the LPC will go as far as taking your ID number and your name and all your particulars and running it through CIPC. And they will double check your directorship, because at the end of your pupillage, you state on affidavit that you weren't involved in any other business, that you spent your full time in your pupillage. And if they find that that wasn't the case, if you derived income from any source from work that you've done, you will be declared unfit and improper, and
That
you will
is
not be
hectic.
admitted.
Okay, yeah, you just completely put me off of studying LRB. Thanks, Hannah. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's a lot. You know, if you do your articles and you are fortunate enough to be employed by a firm that pays adequately, because that's a complete conversation on the side about what is adequate pay, or at least what is the debate about adequate pay for candidate attorneys. But if you are fortunate enough to get decent pay there, then you are sorted for 2 years. But pupillage, on the other hand, there's no compensation.
Okay, so hectic. How would you say that the whole article period or training period that you were contracted to do, um, how would you say that prepares new lawyers for the career in the business world, or not really? Would you say it does, or not?
So I'll give it in the legal setting, and then I'll give it in the business setting, because I think at some point the world of business, we call it, and then the legal setting, they obviously come together. But I do think that if you do part-time law school, which is what I did, you do 2 years of articles. If you do full-time law school, you are allowed to do 1 year. And even after 2 years, in a firm that gave me broad spectrum exposure, I had a decent amount of accountability and independence to run matters, while obviously still accounting to those above me. 2 years to fully immerse yourself in a legal practice, to gain skills concerning drafting, client management, time management, I would actually say it's still not enough. And then, by virtue of you complying with all the requirements, you, at the end of the day, you become an admitted attorney, and then you kind of are thrown into the deep end, and you need to learn how to swim, because the law says you're entitled to now. And I think it can place a lot of pressure on newly admitted attorneys, because you feel like the world is on, the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And if you mess up, the consequences are dire. And when you are dealing with somebody's life, their money, their business, their problems, those things are dire for them. And you have to approach every client in that same way, because they are coming to you in a time of need, and they trust you, and you need to deliver. So it's difficult for me, because I still don't think then that adding another year to the 2 years of articles that a candidate attorney goes through is the best option still. And that's why I think that in any type of law firm that you are in, despite the fact that you are already admitted as an attorney, newly admitted attorneys still need a lot of support and a lot of guidance from those who have been in the profession for longer than them, and a lot of support, because we're seeing a lot of our attorneys leave the legal profession to go in-house. So that's one part. In terms of business, I think what articles does is it teaches candidates how to work under pressure. Your job is so multifaceted. You do drafting work, but you also have to do administrative work. You need to attend to the courts and deal with the admin of that system, which is quite an interesting body of its own. And then you also have to navigate studying for your board exams. And if you didn't study through a distance learning institution like UNISA, for example, you probably don't know what it feels like to work full time and study. So I do think that there are skills that you can take from your articles that would put you in good stead, whether or not you stay in your firm or whether you go in-house. But I do think a big one that any candidate can do who has undergone their articles and who has experienced training like that is to know when the right time is to speak up. And when you get admitted as an attorney, I do think that a lot of newly admitted attorneys feel like they can't or shouldn't ask for help, but we learn from each other in the profession every day. Nobody has all the answers. And I think what makes the profession great at its core is that you are surrounded by individuals who have knowledge, and most individuals want to share it. So that's the advice that I would give for newly admitted attorneys who kind of feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders.
So, would you say this whole ordeal is an obstacle or a challenge that everyone's being faced during the whole article season?
I do. And the reason I say that is because the university can only do so much. And what a lot of candidate attorneys say during their articles is that they weren't prepared at all for the world of work. And I sit back now and I think about the volume of work that you have to get through just to get your LLB. And I wonder where, in and amongst those reams and reams and reams of papers that we go through to study and to read, where the time actually is for you to become fully immersed in what it would take to be employed. And that's why I think the onus rests on students to go and find that practical experience for themselves. You can do vacation work, you can job shadow, and I think it's one of the most responsible things that you can do as a student to allow you to know what you are kind of getting yourself into, even if it's just a sliver of what you'll get yourself into. But there are hurdles. I mean, just recently, and I say recently, but it was a topic of conversation during my articles. But there were lots of law firms posting vacancies for candidate attorneys to be employed, but they had to be proficient in not just one, but two languages, and that's professional proficiency, written, verbal, and they had to have a driver's license because a lot of the work of a candidate attorney is filing documents at court, serving documents, following up in various places, and there were lots of barriers that students were faced with to just simply enter the profession. And I mean, the driver's license thing for a start was one of them. And despite the fact that it's now no longer, an inherent requirement, or isn't allowed to be an inherent requirement to get your articles, there are still firms who are posting vacancies with those requirements there. So for starters, just entry into the profession is a barrier for some. Then you have people who have obviously started working and are getting paid a very, very, very small salary. And I understand that your articles are not there to make you wealthy, and you'll never get wealthy from your first job, or most of us won't.
Well, I mean, I can debate that because doctors, I know doctors and lawyers are like one saving a life, but one saving someone not going to jail. So you can kind of debate it, but you know, doctors get a lot compared to a lawyer or entry lawyer, a candidate attorney, which I feel isn't too great, and something should balance out. If maybe, I don't know, like that's just my opinion though. Just a quick interruption before we carry on with this awesome episode. I don't know about you, but I've always wanted to start a podcast, and I finally did. All thanks to this awesome software that we're currently using, Podcastle. If you guys are keen on starting a podcast as well, just like us, go on our Linktree and click on Start Your Own Podcast. If there's any questions, feel free to email us or just DM us on any platform that we have available, and we will help you through the whole process. It is quite daunting, it is quite scary, but let us know if you need help, and start your own podcast. It would be great to listen with you guys.
Okay, so I do agree. You have a valid point about the hurdles that candidates faced entering the profession, particularly on the article side when they do their articles of clerkship. One is that you obviously have to attend law school. And if you are getting paid a salary that isn't necessarily covering a lot of your basic expenses, and you are to some degree more self-sufficient, perhaps maybe parents have cut you off and you're really experiencing what it is now to live a life, you have to pay for law school. And if you do it full time, you're looking at, I think, about 10 to 15K. Whereas if you do it part time, I honestly can't even remember what it cost, but I was fortunate enough that my law firm actually sponsored that for me. And when you start doing your articles, it's not the norm that you are getting paid richly. And so small things like that really help. Another thing is that you need to write and pass 4 board exams. And, if you follow the stats of the pass rates of those exams, I mean, candidates wrote in March and I think they got their results about a week ago. The pass rate for some subjects are really poor. And the debate on why that is also, ongoing and interesting in and of itself. But yeah, you need to pass those.
Yeah, so
And
I actually saw, sorry, Hannah, not to cut you off. I actually saw those results on LinkedIn on one of our I wouldn't say friends, but people that we know that we actually spoke about, that has very high opinions on law, posted it on LinkedIn, and I saw these results, and I was like, "What? That's hectic. Why would you say that the results are so low?" On your opinion,
that's
obviously.
yeah. So I can definitely speak of the nature of the exams. So you have 4 exams. 2 of them are inherently theoretical. Those are court procedures and ethics. And then you have 2 which are practical. That's your bookkeeping. We call it accounting amongst us. And then your estates. And I can definitely speak for the wonderful classes that you can pay additionally for to get that practical experience for accounting and estates. But what comes with that is an additional expense. And you can look at, again, I mean, I did this 2 years ago. So I don't think that those classes are anything less than about 700 Rand each. So that's already 1,400 Rand for some people who get earn 5,500 Rand a month, right? So that's definitely something I can speak on for the practical papers. For the theoretical papers, it's a lot of things. One I'll say is that candidates for the first time in their life are placed in a position where they need to work and study. And not all work environments are, supportive. Lots of candidates are experiencing stresses that they've never felt for the first time, and they really struggle to dedicate the time that they need to study for those exams. So that's one. I think it's the fact that you are maturing in a workspace where every day you are confronted with something new, every day you are confronted with learning, and at the end of the day, you don't even have 2 brain cells to rub together to sit down and to apply your mind. So that's definitely a problem. The second one I would say is the the papers are geared in a way where I think a lot of candidates believe that they can just do past paper questions and they will pass the exam. And those exams are challenging and you need to, again, apply your mind. And the volume of the work is also really daunting. And that's why I think simply doing past papers gives students the impression that they've kind of covered enough to pass, but I don't think you can predict what will be in those papers. And it becomes increasingly difficult to predict because of the volume of work you have to get through. So, and I haven't seen the paper, but I have seen the debates that have been happening on LinkedIn in particular. And I also read the letter that was sent out by, I think, the Gauteng Candidate Attorneys Association to the LPC, where they complained about, in particular, the ethics paper, where they were asked to do fill in the blanks. And having written ethics myself, I can tell you that you have to get through a lot of material. Do I think that fill in the blanks is probably the best way to assess candidate attorneys' knowledge of what they've studied? No. But do I think that those fill in the blanks were the bulk of the paper that, had you have not known the particular word, you would have not passed? No, I don't. So it's definitely nuanced, and the material that you are provided to study with, if you have the time to apply your mind to it, has all the answers you need. It's just very difficult navigating that studying as a working professional with all the other stresses that come with trying to get through your first big girl or big boy job.
Sure. Okay. So would you say that these are some of the reasons lawyers move to private practice, um, or
Well,
what?
definitely. I would say that is one. But I would say another one, and it's obviously something we've discussed as well, but I do think that salaries in businesses and in-house roles are a lot more competitive. And I think a lot of people would be surprised at what a newly admitted attorney is earning in your average law firm. And I can understand why people end up looking for opportunities where there is a higher bracket in which they can earn, because you have given of quite a few years of your time in order to gain a skill. So one of them I think is definitely pay. The second one I would say is the way in which attorneys are required to work. So attorneys are run, or at least their lives are run by the billable hour. And if you work in a firm that bills per hour, you have a target that you need to reach. It could be a daily target, a weekly target, a monthly target, but that is the way in which you generate money for your firm. And you can understand that if you bill per hour, it's difficult to put an end to your day when the amount of hours you work is also directly proportional to the amount of money you can bring in. So when does a day end? I mean, it's to the point where if what you have done hasn't been a full hour, you get some firms that bill in 10-minute increments, 15-minute increments. So every single minute of your day is technically accounted for. If you move into an in-house private position, per se, in an in-house legal counsel role, the chances of you billing per hour are, in my opinion, practically nil. You are a salaried employee that has KPIs and deliverables, but it's not necessary that every single 6 to 10 to 15 or 1 hour of your day is accounted for in writing and has a rand value attached to it. And I think the fact that every hour of your day isn't necessarily accounted for in that way gives a lot of attorneys this feeling that they can now breathe and not everything is as stressful as it once was. And that is definitely something that I think attracts a lot of attorneys. It's what their Monday to Friday looks like. But another issue I think that can frustrate a lot of attorneys is the court administration. The role of attorney is largely administrative, and obviously there are lots of things that you can do in a day, but you also have the court that you need to work with. Versus in a business setting, as an in-house counsel, you are accountable to your directors and you aren't necessarily working within the court system unless your disputes become litigious. But I mean, I think one body that you would probably work with in terms of a dispute is maybe the CCMA. So the bodies that you work with are different. But that's not to say that the stress that in-house counsel experience is any less than that of an attorney in practice. And that's something that I think a lot of people fail to realize is you're working with contracts, you're working with a business, you're working with people's employment. Your decisions are still big decisions to make, and you are still highly accountable
Yeah,
for the work that you deliver and the advice that you give.
yeah, that's true. And how would you say the roles from a day-to-day in-house lawyer differs from a lawyer in private practice, particularly in the business context?
So the options of law that you can practice in a law firm range from family disputes. It could be corporate law. It could be stuff that involves trusts. So it's quite broad. In a business setting, I think, despite the fact that there's still a lot to do, it is kind of more niche in the sense that you're probably dealing with contracts, employment agreements. You might also be talking to trade unions, which is a completely separate skill set that one would need to have. And, you'd have to have really good interpersonal skills and the ability to listen and negotiate and all of those things. But then you'll also still have to make decisions that affect the business that you work in. So you'd also have to have a really good understanding of what your business does, what type of service do you offer, what is your product, and it still requires a really good in-depth understanding of what you do. But at the end of the day, your role is still to advise, your role is still to make decisions, your role is still to manage risk. It's just the nature of those decisions and the subject matter you deal with.
Sure. Okay, so Hannah, as a professional, because I consider you as a professional, just off everything that you've have achieved. Um, I'm okay. Practical example now. I'm starting a business, and you are my legal advisor, right? You're my lawyer, right? What do you advise me to do to start my business in a safe manner? I want to employ people. I want to join partnerships. The whole ordeal. How do you guys approach the situation?
So, with anything, we would obviously need to have a consult to understand where you want to go, what nature of business you intend setting up, how many employees, all of those things. I think a number one thing that we would probably direct you to do is to kind of get acquainted with what is necessary to simply just start up your business. And an attorney would have to have a good understanding of everything companies and intellectual property related. So that would be setting up a name, it would be opening a bank account for your business, and it would be making sure that you are tax compliant with all of the necessary things in order to, um, spend money, receive money, and kind of all the tax and VAT implications that that would have for your business. Then we would also have to consult and ask you about whether or not you intend employing anybody, and if so, the nature of that employment, and kind of just get you acquainted with what your roles would be as an employer, how you would have to compensate your staff, uh, how you would set up your employment contracts, and things of that sort. Because there's a lot that goes into employing people. It would be what you do with your, how you deduct UIF. It has to do with how you set up payment incentives, a leave, things like that. And then another one that I would probably advise on is how you, as a business owner, would draw a salary. Um, Something that we find a lot, and particularly in a very interesting field of law when it comes to impending or pending divorces with spouses who run businesses. And a lot of the time, you'll have a spouse that is a business owner and a spouse that isn't, and they've split up. And the spouse who is a business owner and who has income might not be paying the other spouse. And the spouse who isn't receiving income institutes what we call a Rule 43 application, which is for maintenance or payment of certain costs in the interim pending the finalization of the divorce. And it calls on both parties to do financial disclosures. And particularly in spouses who are business owners, we find that there's a lot of skullduggery when it comes to drawings of salaries, when it comes to expenses paid out of the business. And that information has to be put before the court in affidavit. So it's under oath. And there we are seeing a lot of underhanded dealings when it comes to ways businesses are set up and how income is spent in the business. So number one would be make sure that you are tax compliant, make sure that you have a good financial reporting standard, or at least accountants that can do that, because attorneys can't be the knowers of all knowledge. We can just let you know where you need to focus your mind, so that in the event that you need to account to a body or even to account to a partner, that your business practices are transparent and compliant.
Sure. So it's literally just not about contracts. There's so much more to a business in a legal sense than just a contract between me and you.
So much. And I think from a legal standpoint, what attorneys are also obliged to do is to advise their clients about ethical business practices. And that's where I think attorneys sometimes get a bad rep. People think that we are here to take your situation and to mold the outcome in a way where we kind of sidestep all the rules and regulations. And good legal advice is advice that is not intended to make you happy with the result, but to give you the best information and tools to make the right decision for the longevity of your business and for you as a person. And that goes further than just telling you what you need to do to set up a contract. It's also giving you responsible business practices so that you can not only run a successful business, but be a successful business and create stable employment for people who rely on you for their income. It's about being someone of good legal standing. And I think it's an obligation that we have not just to our clients, but as officers of the court.
Yeah, and I think it's a misconception that people have. They're like, no, we can't trust lawyers. No, you can't trust a lawyer. He's a lawyer. He studied law, or she studied law. We can't trust them. They're lawyers. And I'm just like, we've actually got we actually had this chat the other day on our legislation in our country, that it is such a good legislation, actually. Like, we've got good legislation, and I think we can agree on that, right?
Yeah, we really do. And I mean, I just want to take it back to something that I'm realizing every single day during my pupillage journey. So we have lectures, and the Joburg Bar has been incredible in equipping us with the knowledge that we need to tackle practice, but also the practical skills. And one of the most valuable modules we have is on ethics. And as an advocate, we kind of form the end of the chain. It's the last point of call for advice before you approach the court and you actually present your matter. That's the way I like to think of it. And a big thing that people don't understand about advocates is that one of the most important roles that we can have is our independence. We are not employed by attorneys. We advise and we assist and we consult. But our responsibility is first as public servants, but second to the courts. And we have a duty to act honestly and not to mislead the court. And something that was so interesting to me when I started my ethics module is, if you approach the court as an advocate, you have a responsibility to tell the court facts about your case that hurt you, that are not in your interest. You need to even tell the court when case law that you have found doesn't work for your case. If you approach the court on an ex parte basis, meaning you are the only one approaching the court, you aren't asking for relief from anybody else, you have such a duty to make sure you disclose every material fact that could have a weight or a bearing on that judge making a decision, because the judge should be able to take anything that an advocate says and be able to establish that that is honest and it is accurate. And we are not supposed to become too tightly involved with attorneys that we end up doing work for them in terms of what they want us to do, as opposed to what is right in law, and working with the facts of our client's case within the parameters of the law. Independence is everything.
Sure. So
And
in
that's why the business model is so
yeah.
different.
So, Hannah, in essence, you're saying, listen, guys, whoever wants to start a business, don't just start a business. Be sure about what you're starting. Be tax compliant. Get your documents in order. Know who you're hiring. Um, be sure that you have the correct contracts in order for people that you hire, and all these things. That's what you're basically saying.
Yeah, I think as a starting point, because I'm also very alive to the fact that not everybody can afford or has access to legal services,
Yeah.
because it is a specialized service. And um, especially for business startups and things like that, they aren't
Sorry,
necessarily.
Hannah. I just want to ask: isn't there free legal service for people out there? Like I know there's free medical, but for legal, is there something like that or not?
So there is the legal aid, um, but the legal aid also has certain parameters put in place about who has access to that service. And off the top of my head, I won't be able to tell you what the income is for people who can who comply with the requirements for obtaining free legal services. But, and it's a debate that I had with someone the other day. In my opinion, I think that that threshold of income is still so low, because where it assists some people who are practically indigent, what it doesn't assist is for those people who earn above that threshold, but still do not have the money to put aside to access legal services, but who still need legal services. So the nature of legal advice or legal representation that an indigent person would have or need isn't necessarily advice on how to start a business. We're seeing Legal Aid South Africa represent a lot of people who are accused of being illegal immigrants in the country. We see it for people who have been arrested for crimes and theft for nominal amounts, or for people who are actually stealing because they don't have enough money to buy food to eat. So yeah, the nature of assistance of legal aid is it does a good job, but also it's a system placed under so much pressure that they need to service such a huge group of people, and they really are understaffed. So there are access to free legal services, but the attainment of that service for the general public is really, it's a tricky one to navigate. But yeah, uh, there are lots of resources available to people who want to start up businesses. I mean, if you go onto the CIPC Companies and Intellectual Property Commission website, there's a lot of information available to people who want to start businesses. But obviously, it is incredibly nuanced, and there are a lot of things that I think an attorney or someone with a bit of legal knowledge would be able to assist with, kind of just to even out certain nooks and crannies.
Yeah, so I registered a company, and all this legal stuff started popping up that I studied, that obviously for BCom law, but like entrepreneurial law, you learn the Companies Act, you learn what's a memorandum of wada, all those things, right? And I was like, hey, I actually know what I'm doing here. Like, it made me so like at peace, Like I'm like, okay, this is what this means. This is what this means. Like a lot of people, like I think they get so like in a space of panic, and it's daunting for them to start something or a business or whatever because they don't have this knowledge, right? And for people that don't have this knowledge, what's the best advice as a future advocate, soon to be advocate? Um, would you say, listen, do this, go on this website, it's easy, come visit me, come visit this firm? What do you suggest?
So I think it would depend on the type of business that a person intends to start up. But the first thing that I would probably suggest that a person does, especially if they aren't in a position to get legal advice, is I would encourage them to go onto the CIPC website and to download the information on startups. And there are incredible resources on there. There are PDF downloadable documents that can assist you with. Yeah, I actually was on there, I think a couple months ago, while I was doing my articles. I was navigating an opinion for a foreign business based, I think, in Switzerland, to start up a business here. And there really are great resources on the website, from how you can set up a name and the requirements to register your name. It can even go as far as advising on how to set up certain business bank accounts. Obviously, they won't tell you which bank to use. I mean, that's something for you to decide, but it even suggests those certain requirements that you need to comply with. It can assist you with certain tax things that you need to navigate. But I also think that it could be incredibly beneficial to go onto SARS's website, and they have incredible FAQs there that people can find a lot of benefit from. But then go into a SARS branch and ensure that you are doing everything you can to become acquainted with what the requirements are to be tax compliant as a business. And then the last one is, I would encourage somebody to become well acquainted with the Labor Relations Act and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And I really think that legislation has been drafted in an incredibly accessible way. And if you still struggle with that, um, you know, there are resources that make understanding that material easier. Uh, the departments, for example, are a great place to go to. They have good resources. And I also think if you make a trip there, you'd be able to speak to somebody who could answer your questions in real time.
Sure. Okay. So, in essence, if you had to give 3 points right now, you would say get your documents in order, know your tax legislation and know your basic conditions of employment and your Labor Relations Act. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely, definitely. To be a conscientious business owner, and if what you intend to do is employ people, to
Yeah.
be a conscientious employer.
Sure. And Hannah, just before closing off now, um, we usually do like a little bit of a motivational at the end. What would you say as a advocate to be a little bit of a motivational for people that want to start businesses but are scared of the legal advice and legal concepts and all that? What would you advise or say to them?
I would say it's incredibly brave to follow an entrepreneurial route and to do something that you are passionate about. I think it is becoming more and more important as South Africans to ensure that we do everything possible to maintain multiple streams of income. I would say that we need to encourage people to establish businesses to create economic freedom in households, but also in jobs and employment. And then to close off, I would say that you need to do everything possible to be informed, but any decision made from a place of integrity, transparency, and a will to want to gain information is a good place to start, even if you make a mistake. But the minute you find out that you've made a mistake, try and course correct immediately, because mistakes made in good faith are a lot easier to fix than mistakes made in bad faith.
Yeah, that is some wisdom. Thank you, Hannah. That
That is
is
what I
that
would say.
that is some massive wisdom. So the very last thing, just before closing off, I usually ask the people that I interview a question, and then I ask them to ask a question for the next person. So the question that is posed for you, luckily it's an easy one today, is what is your morning routine like as a attorney, advocate to be, and possibly a couple of business owner you going to be one day?
So my morning routine is wake up with the first alarm and not snooze it. Uh, Boil the kettle, have a nice cup of tea, try and get some time outside. I really value outside time. Get some sun shining on your face. And I think it's a good way to start a day because it's already a good start. So whatever happens after that can't necessarily derail everything.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. And
Hmm.
how would you, what question would you ask for the next person on the podcast?
My
Can be any,
question would
can be
be,
anything, eh?
I'm going to ask something that I think I would be intrigued to know about just the general person. I would say, when you find yourself awake at 2 a.m. and you aren't able to sleep, what is the first thought that usually pops into your mind?
Okay. What's your first thought that usually pops into your mind?
Oh, my first thought is 32 days still enough for me to write and pass my 5 exams that I have in July?
Yes,
And
girl.
what can I do to maximize my
No,
time?
we believe you. We behind you. So you go get it.
Oh, thanks, Sergio, and thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Thank you for the wisdom and the legal advice, literally, that you have given the people today. And I really know and hope that this has touched and inspired some young, soon to be lawyers, advocates, legal advisors, and business owners. So, yeah, thanks so much, Hannah, and really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sergio. Chat to you later.
Thanks. Catch you guys in the next one.
Bye.
I just want to say thanks to everyone for listening. And I just want to encourage everyone just to subscribe, go to our social media pages, Instagram, LinkedIn. And if you guys are keen on booking a call with us to do a session with us and just have good chats, book a call on our Linktree link and see you guys in the next one. Thanks.